Hello everyone. In this presentation I'm going to walk you through setting up a Word document according to MLA guidelines. Basically going to start with what Word typically sets up as a default, and so I'm going to walk you through how the kinds of changes that you're going to have to make in order to have an MLA formatted essay. Okay, so to start we're going to change probably the easiest thing to change, which is the font. All right, so for an MLA formatted document, for the most part, you want to use Times New Roman, and that, of course, is in this drop-down menu where you can select Times New Roman. Now, if you can't see it up here where it says recently used fonts, you can just go ahead and start typing in Times, and it will typically show up in under all fonts. All right, I already have it set up to find Times New Roman, so that's why you can't see it here. But you want to use Times New Roman. Now, for the most part, this particular font can be used in most every class. Very rarely will a professor use a different font, but they typically use a font like Times New Roman, Arial, Courier. Those are the typical fonts, but Times New Roman is pretty much the standard. As for the size, you want the size to be 12. No more, no less. Don't make it 12.5. Don't make it 13, 14. It needs to be 12. Trust me, your professors can see the difference. Now, if you're going to be writing a bunch of papers in your classes, I would strongly suggest setting up what's called a default. That's where whenever you open up Word, it automatically has it set at Times New Roman size 12. Otherwise, you're going to have to make this change every single time you open a new document. Now, to do that, you want to go here where it says Font, and there's a tiny little box here. I don't know why they set it up like this, but that's how it's typically set up. There's a tiny little box here where you can select, and it opens this window. Now in this window, you can set it as Times New Roman size 12 as before, but the other thing that's great about this particular setup is that you can set as a default, which is down here on the bottom left-hand corner of the window. Now when you do that, you want to click on it, and it's going to ask you to either set up the default as this document only, or do you want to set it as the default for all documents based on the normal template. You want this second entry here. All right. That way, every time you open a new Word document, it's always going to be in Times New Roman size 12. Setting defaults can help save time and some frustration, especially if you're going to continue writing essays in a college setting. So let's go ahead and set that default. Okay, so we've got our font set. Now we'd like to set the spacing. All right, so for an MLA formatted document, you want to set the spacing at 2.0. So you can do it here, where these two little arrows, one pointing up, one pointing down with this icon. If you just hover your mouse over it for a second, it'll typically tell you what it is, and that's line and paragraph spacing. So what you want to do is you want to set that to 2.0. Right. Now there is another default in Word that you will need to change, and to change that you can either do it here where you have to remove space after paragraph, or, and this is where I typically prefer to go simply because it's easier to see and so you know it's actually going to happen, is the same little box that's over here with font. Paragraph has the same thing. So go ahead and click on that, and what you'll typically find is over here where it says before and after, one or both of these these text boxes here will say 8 or 6, somewhere around there. You want to change those so that way they say 0. Alright, make sure it says double spacing over here where it says line spacing. Once you've done that, you can also set this as a default. So that way, you can actually have double spacing every single time you open up Word. Okay. Now that same paragraph menu, let me go back, is another place where you're going to need to know the special drop-down box. Now this is where you'll be able to set up what's called a hanging indent. Now I'm not going to set that up right now because that's going to come later. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and hit OK again. Now everything should be set just fine at the moment. So what I'm going to do now is create what's called a heading. Now a heading is very different from a header. I'm going to discuss a header in just a minute. But the heading is basically written at the very top of the first page. you should not see this. For instance, if you see this dotted line up at the top of the page, you're in the header. Do not type the next information in the header. All right, so it needs to look just like this. So what you need is your first name and last name, all right, however you like to be called. Next, you need to set up the class. So for this, I'd like to just set up class section, for the section class and section number. Okay, so whatever that is. Now, I'm typing that here now, so that way you can see that what it is, so that if you're following along with me on Word, you can actually just leave that there so that way you know what that's supposed to be. But I'm going to go ahead and write in a specific one. There we go. So it should look something like that. All right, the next thing is going to be your professor. And then after that, it's going to be the type of assignment. So if it's essay 1, essay 2, persuasive essay, argumentative essay, informative essay, whatever that type of essay is, that's what you're going to put here. So you can just put type of assignment. And the next is going to be the due date. Now I am writing this on July 7th, 2019, so let's go ahead and, I'm sorry, January 7th, 2019. So it's going to look like this. So 7 January 2019. According to MLA, you need to put the day first, then the month, and then the year. That's it. All right, and it looks like my spacing is just a bit off, so what I'm going to do here is highlight. I think I forgot to change, yes I did, forgot to change that there. So let's go ahead and set this as default, so that way it changes that. This is a good way of actually setting this. I keep forgetting hit OK first. Do you see the difference between the spacing? See how much more space you had before? Now I'm going to set this as default. Okay, let's fix that now. Alright, now it's right. Okay, so after you type the date, you want to hit enter again, and just once, and you want to center the cursor. So the second icon up here is how you center it. Don't try and hit space or tab or anything else like that in order to get to the center. Instead, just rely on that particular icon. And here is where you want to type the title of the essay. Now, the title of the essay does not need anything fancy according to MLA standards. You just need it to just look just like this. That means no underlining, no bold, no italics, don't use a different size font, don't use a different font, nothing like that. Keep everything consistent and clean. All right, you can hit enter one more time after typing the title, and then backspace once to get the cursor back to the left-hand margin. Now, you need to hit tab once, and that should be about ½ an inch away from the margin, and this is where you want to start your essay. All right, so the essay should look just like this on the first page for right now. There's one other thing that we're missing, and that is going to be the page number and the header. All right, but it should look just like this for an MLA standard essay. So let's go ahead and insert the header. Inserting the header is pretty easy. Just go to the Insert tab, and what you're looking for is page number. Now, the page number needs to be at the top of the page and the right-hand side. So for PC users, it's going to be plain number 3. So that's what you're looking for. You don't need any of these extra fancy kinds of headers. You just need plain number 3. All right. So from there, the cursor should immediately be to the left of the page, and so you need to type. Just don't do anything else except for type your last name and a space. Now, if you've already set your font as a default, you should see the same font. Now, if you don't, you need to make sure and highlight that and make sure that the font is the correct one. Now, most of the time, students miss this, and so this is usually the first thing that I look for when I'm looking at formatting, because students oftentimes leave this as the default font, where it looks like this. So when I'm reading an essay for the first time, the first thing I do is go to this section right here. And if I see that the font is not correct, then I'll note it. Then I'll know that there are probably going to be other issues with formatting that I'll need to look for. All right, so if you don't want me to put my backup quite so early in the essay, I strongly suggest making sure that this section is Times New Roman size 12. Okay, so that is the first page. Now, of course, anytime during this video, I strongly suggest pausing, rewinding if you need to, especially if anything's confusing. But your essay should look just like this on the first page. Now, let's go ahead and work on the works cited page, which is going to be a bit different. Okay, so on the works cited page, when you're finished with your essay, let's just imagine for the moment that the essay is finished. What you need to do is you need to go back to insert. You need to insert what's called a page break. Now what this does is it actually moves the cursor onto at the top of the next page automatically. Now a lot of students end up trying to hit enter until they get to the next page, but please don't do that. Because if you do end up editing your essay and you end up removing sentences or adding sentences, the works cited page is going to shift around a lot. It's going to move up, it's going to move down, and it's a little irritating to keep track of that. And a lot of students actually forget to make sure that their works cited page is at the top of the last page. So page break actually helps prevent that, because no matter what happens above the page break, this section that we just added here is always going to be the top of the next page, of the last page. Okay, so let's go back to home and let's go ahead and center the cursor, and it needs to be works cited is the title that goes at the top of the works cited page. Now if you only have one source that you're listing in the works cited page, make sure to leave off the S, so it should just be work cited. However, if you have multiple sources, you want to add works. So if you have more than one source, it needs to be works cited. If you have only one source, it just needs to be works cited. Now in terms of how many sources you need, that depends on the essay and of course how many sources you use. Alright, so once again, as before, hit enter and then backspace, and that'll get you right back to the left-hand margin. Now here is where you need to go back to that paragraph window. Now you can go to the same place that I showed you before with this little box, or you can actually right click. So right click is another way of getting to the same menu. For Mac users, it's typically control click. We'll do the same thing as a right click, unless you have your computer set up differently. So let's go ahead and go back to paragraph. And for a works cited page, the works cited entries need to have what's called a hanging indent. Now it's a little hard to explain right this second, but trust me, you need to go to special drop-down box, select this, and hit hanging. And I'll show you what that looks like here in just a second when I use an example. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit OK. Now for this, you don't want to set this as a default because this is something that only occurs on the works cited page. You don't want it to be set as a default, otherwise you're going to have to fix it on all of your documents. So leave this one alone. Okay, so let's hit OK there. Let me go ahead and go to really quickly find a source to use. Alright, so this is a source I typically use a lot, so I know it's going to be pretty easy for me to get. Now the website I'm using here for a sec, just real quick, is called easybib.com. Now I want to create a citation, and this is a really easy way, a good way of creating citations. Now you do need to be careful though, because one, the website can be a little ad heavy. Also, there are more sources than just websites. So as you can see, there's around like 50 some odd sources here. Make sure you're choosing the right one. Typically students use websites, books, journals, film, online videos, those kinds of things the most, and those are usually listed right here at the top. So I'm using a website, so I'm just going to go ahead and cite this one. Alright, so let's go ahead and cite again. It looks like it's got everything I need, so let's go ahead and continue. Okay, so it's going to take you to this form just to make sure that in case anything you do need to fix can be fixed. So oftentimes the algorithm that EasyBib uses, they don't catch the full title, or it catches the wrong title, so you want to make sure that the title's correct. Same thing with author and also with website titles. Now, as I said, I've used this one in the past, and so I know it's actually going to be pretty easy, and I know it's going to be correct. So everything here is correct, so I'm going to go ahead and hit complete citation. Okay, so when you scroll down, you should be able to see the citation here. And for that, you want to highlight it, and you want to copy it. And for right now, what I'm doing is I'm hitting Control C in order to copy. For a Mac, it's Command C is the shortcut key for copying. Or of course, you can right-click and hit copy. Both do the same thing. Okay, so I want to paste my works cited entry here, and I can do the same thing. I can go right-click and paste, or I can hit Control V and it'll do the same thing. Now, if you notice, when I copied it, it didn't copy it exactly the way that I needed it to be copied. So this little clipboard here that always appears whenever you paste something, you need to click on it and make sure to select Merge Formatting. All right, so merge formatting is the best way of combining both the format of the original source and the format in your own essay, in the own document that you're writing. And so that way it combines both of them, so that way you don't lose points for formatting issues. So if you notice, you can see like the big difference here whenever I shift my mouse between keep source formatting, merge formatting, and even keep text only. In the text only, you can see that the italics for the magazine The New Yorker, which should be italicized, it falls away. Right? So merge formatting is the one you want to go with. Right? Now be careful if you're copying and pasting, once you hit enter or once you start typing on a new entry, this little clipboard goes away. And so sometimes whenever you're copying and pasting, there might be like gray highlighting, or there might be some other issues. Once you move away and start typing on something else in the document, that option to merge formatting goes away, and so you're going to have to redo that particular entry. All right, see, so I hit enter, and now that option for me to change anything goes away. So I'm going to either, if anything was wrong, I'd either have to retype it here, or I'd have to completely delete it and then repaste. All right, so this is what a works cited entry should look like, where you see that this second line of the entry is indented. That's the hanging indent. What this does is it helps make it easy for readers to be able to find sources. So if I had a bunch of sources that were listed here in alphabetical order, I'd be able to take a look at the first name. Now, if you did your in-text citations correctly, the first word that appears in the citation is what is here in the works cited entry is what should appear in the citation. That way it makes it easy for me to find what type of source that you used. Okay. Now, another way that you can also make sure that you did it correctly is up here at the top. Now, in your Word document, most of the time the default does not show this ruler. Now, if you want to view it, you need to go to the View tab and make sure to check Ruler. It is actually pretty helpful to see it. I don't know why they got rid of it. I guess they thought it looked cluttered or something. But for me, it actually makes a huge difference to be able to double check my margins and double check my indentions if I can see the ruler. So the sliders on the ruler should look like this. If they don't, then the formatting is wrong for the hanging indent. All right, so where you have the bottom slider here, where if you hover your mouse over that little bottom triangle, it says hanging indent. If it doesn't look like this, then it's incorrect, and so you need to make sure to actually correct that. All right, so that is a MLA formatted document. Now, if you do have any questions about how to format this, or if you have any questions about the video that I've the steps that I've followed here, especially if I went too fast or anything like that, please be sure and let me know. I'm always happy to help.